Oh, I love the rainy nights. That was my song for this time. Last time it was 3-6 Mafia, so, stay tuned. Stay tuned. Tonight, Denise and I are talking with Jess Adams. You can find her at Handlers and Humans. She is a licensed therapist that helps people, specifically helps dog owners and reactive pet parents. So she's going to appear very soon. Well, I'm going to ask her. God, get in. Where are you, Denise? Ask, and they shall appear.
Hey,
Build
ladies.
it, and they will come. All right, everybody, before we get started, everyone smile. We're taking our screenshot. Oh, well, wait. No, I messed up.
You're not going to be able to make me look better. I haven't taken a shower in 4 days. I mean, I was just kind of lucky that well, you know what? I got deodorant, and I'm not spending, I'm at the ranch. There's nowhere to shower. It's not too much worse than that. I don't even have a bathroom, but we won't go there. I'll just leave that one to your imagination.
Well, I'm glad to see you're roughing it. If anybody ever questioned your...
It's actually not too rough. I mean, and I have a little fridge down there. See, I got a little fridge.
Yeah.
And I see that. That's because I have wasps in here. So I set them up with the vacuum cleaner. I don't know if that's going to bite me in the ass, but it's working for now. Probably a better answer. There's another one.
I'm about to light the candle of wisdom. That's the one that I chose for this. We had friendship or wisdom. So I chose wisdom because we're already friends. Nobody screw it up. Okay?
Oh my gosh. Now I have to be wise?
Yeah.
That's a lot of pressure.
Okay, welcome everybody. We don't feel pressure to be wise. Just be yourself and hope that comes across as wise. That's what I do. It's a 50-50.
Yeah.
You know what? We could start this live by me calling out Jerri, because Jerri did something. It's awful. It's appalling. And I think you need to be called on the table for that one. Be the carpet, but knowing you, the table's probably more appropriate. So I do these threads where I tell people they can say anything they want and you can't comment. Hundreds of people, one, respond, and two, get the rules, right? The rules are very clear. Who do you think of all the people, who do you think couldn't follow the rules? Jerri. Jerri could not follow the rules. Everybody else got it. Now, I will say, because you look slightly contrite, I will say that you were supporting people and you were being like, I'm like, God damn it, Jerri, 5 minutes in, and there you
go. It's a little bit, I feel like it's a little bit like the no cussing rule.
Is it possible to maintain?
Rules are made to be broken. It's just, how are we going to break them? How are we going to break them? I did. And you know what? I don't even know if that person even reached out to me. And let's just hope that they didn't, and we can just pretend that I didn't.
Jerri, are you trying to say it only happened once? Because it didn't happen once.
I did it one time.
No, you did not.
I'm gonna research.
You did it on multiple threads.
You just
did. You totally
did. Is it 1 or 2?
We're letting it go. Okay.
Oh, I'm going to totally let this go.
Lesson
I'm
learned.
Just saying.
Lesson learned.
I said what I got to say. I'm ready to move on.
We're the best rule breakers, somebody said. I agree.
Yeah.
All right. So, Jess, I posted a little bit about you today and how you're a licensed therapist that is going through their own journey with their reactive dog. And you have a really cool pin post about that. So I had to kind of put that up there. If you guys want to hear more about her story in terms of like what her personal story is with her dog, it is pinned on her page. I just want to let everybody know that that's there because we've got tons of stuff to talk about. But tell them a little bit about just what you do every day and what you see your job is doing.
Oh my God. Which jobs? All the jobs? I have lots of
jobs.
Well, so I am, like you said, I'm a licensed therapist. I'm in PA, so shout out to the East Coast friends of mine who are here. And I've been a therapist for 12 years, and my dog, who's snoozing next to me here, is 10. He was a handful. I'll just say that. I mean, he's still a little bit of a handful, I'm not gonna lie, but he was really, really challenging early on. I had no idea what I was getting into. I had no business getting him. Like, I will say that constantly. I had no business getting a dog, let alone this dog. And I really, really struggled emotionally with him early on. And I got close with a lot of my trainers because, we spend a lot of time together when you have a challenging dog and you get to know people. And they started to say, I really wish I could send my clients to you for therapy because everyone's struggling emotionally with their dogs. And I started to say, well, maybe you can actually. And that's sort of how the idea formed. And I really had to get my emotional state together to create sustainability with him, right? Like here he was 2 years old. We were doing all of the training things. You name it, we were doing it. And nothing was really shifting. And I was getting flatlined emotionally constantly by like the setbacks and the incidents that would happen, right? I was in bed for a full day crying about it one time, probably more than one time, if I'm being honest. And there was nothing more to do for him. It was really, I had to turn it around and look at myself in the mirror and figure out what I could do differently to cope with it better. Because basically I was looking at how can I do 8 to 12 more years of this level of intensity that I'm experiencing, right? I love him. I want to keep him. I want to make this work. I don't really know that I can make it work with the way that I feel, right? The way that I'm reacting to this. So myth busting time, the therapists, don't necessarily have it together either. So even though I was a therapist, I was not using any of the skills and tools that I was talking to my clients about every single day to handle my emotional experiences with him. Just because we know them doesn't mean we use them. So once I started doing that more mindfully, it shifted, a lot. And it didn't shift in that his behavior got a ton better. It shifted in that I was able to like ride the wave with him, right? And now he's 10. We're down the path quite a ways at this point, but he is still who he is, so it helped me create that like long-term relationship with him and just keep showing up, like keep doing the work, which at one point I truly wasn't sure that I could. It was rough. So
well, that's very honest, that's for sure.
That is what I try to do now. So your original question was, what do I do? With Handlers and Humans, essentially I work with people one-on-one about how to cope with their emotional experiences with their dog. I have group support for that, just a place for people to feel heard and understood and, get some coping skills for themselves. Yeah. Oh, I can't hear.
Oh, you might have muted yourself, Denise.
Oh, yeah.
There. I was saying that I wish I'd understood that you specialized specifically. I knew you did dog human stuff. I didn't really understand exactly what you did because I could have used you for a friend a few months ago who went through a really difficult time and over her dog. And the thing that was so hard was like, I was trying to help her find somebody to help her.
Mm-hmm.
And because she was just so down the path, she couldn't really do anything for herself. And I was like, who would really understand this? It was a grief issue. Who would understand it? Because the relationships dog people have with their dogs, especially with difficult dogs, is radically different than the relationship you have with a typical, I have a couple kids, I got a dog, I got a job. It's like in the when you have a really hard dog, because I also had a reactive dog, it did not work out. But I would say for 2 years, I literally organized my entire life around him. I got up every morning at 5 a.m. because I needed to get him out in the dark before anybody's. I'm not a morning person, but that was irrelevant. It's what he needed. The exercise, the structure, every single moment of my days were very much organized around trying to make him comfortable because there were a lot of issues. Eventually, I sent him back because my family said they were no longer willing to live with him. And because he was showing aggression in the house, and that's scary. So when you have young people living with you and their friends are coming over and you didn't know somebody walks in the door, right? You didn't know they were coming. Your dog isn't where he's supposed to be. And it was just my decision was that this is an unsafe situation, and it's not fair for me to ask that of my family. But I had told people I really think I had a good solid year of hardcore PTSD, waking up in the middle of the night. Where is he? Where's the dog? Where's the dog? And
I remember one time that you told me it was like this, the last thing is you said that what if he got out? You were like, what if by some, and he goes down to the end of the road, and I could see just how like traumatized you were by it. And I think it's something that we don't talk about a lot because of the shame, guilt, little, hamster bubble that it makes us feel like we're in, when the reality is that many people have had a dog that they have had to give up, that they have had to euthanize, that they, and there's this, I'm not sure, one of you will probably know the word, but there's something, it's like a veil of bullshit over that topic of like,
right?
every dog can be saved, every and for me, I tell people this all the time. This is not just a dog thing with me. I have said more times than I could even count in recovery meetings, some of us, and this is slightly different, but I want people to draw the comparison. Some of us will have to die to get it. Some of us don't get to make it in this life. We just don't. And I think that that's true for all sentient beings. I mean, all of us live, all of us die, but it's a topic that I want to talk a little bit about with you, because I know you can't speak about what, patients have said to you and things like that, but do you feel like it's the elephant in the room in a lot of conversations?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I have said to many people in just like consult calls, they reach out to me, they're not sure, they're really overwhelmed. I have said to a lot of people, listen, it's okay to say that this isn't working. It's okay to say that you can't do this. It's okay to say those things. You have permission to allow that possibility to enter your mind. And every single time I've said that, that person has broke down. And it's the stigma, right? I'm not allowed to think about that. I'm not allowed to say that I can't do this, or it's not a fit for me, or it's harming me in some way to try to navigate this life with this particular dog. And it doesn't mean that you can't have other dogs, right? It doesn't mean something about you as a person if it isn't a match, it isn't a fit, or if there's something dangerous going on, if you feel unsafe, if people in your house feel unsafe, right? I do think it's something that people have a really, really hard time speaking about, because there is so much judgment, so much jumping on assumptions when anyone considers that perhaps that dog cannot live safely with them, right? Everyone immediately jumps to, you have to create your life, you have to structure your life to make this work at all costs, no matter what. And I feel like that's what everyone goes to, right? And so people don't feel safe and comfortable questioning that, going against that, right? And so I've ended up working with a handful of people who have chosen rehoming or chosen BE, and through that, the before, during, and after kind of process, or help them kind of make those decisions, even if they were unsure. I didn't expect that, actually, when I sort of started this project, and it's become a huge part of, I should have expected it maybe, right? But I didn't initially, and then folks started coming to me to have those conversations in a safe, non-judgmental space. And it really does break my heart for everyone involved when you already are making such an impossible feeling decision, and you are so scared that your community, that people around you, right, are going to judge it, reject you. I mean, it's the biggest thing we're scared of as humans, right? Like our communities are going to reject us, and that is what we are so terrified to feel and are made to feel very often, I think.
Also, it doesn't help that everyone's sure they could have fixed the dog. So you've got a difficult dog and you're a force-free trainer, and the balance trainer's like, you'd rather kill your dog than fix it with us. You're a balance trainer and you can't fix the dog. The force-free trainers are saying, well, you caused that because you were using whatever you're using. And that is, it's actually appallingly mean-spirited, and that does not stop people. They use your trauma to further their agenda. And like the overwhelming unkindness of that seems to be just lost on people. Like you don't use people's tragedies to manipulate your agenda. That's not acceptable. It's just not acceptable behavior.
It's really, as a person who's done that and then had to turn around and be like, what was that? It's so easy when you're doing in-group stuff, everyone. When you are surrounded by a bunch of people who are repeating essentially doctrine over and over and over, you're inside of this sort of dogmatic place where, you know, if you dissent, if you say something different, if you, and it just becomes, it's human nature for us to fall into the easy, for us to just stumble right into making fun of someone, using, like Denise said, using their pain and their trauma, which we don't see it as that at the time. We're not like, you know, this person seems to be traumatized and here I am. But that never, because we're always the hero of our own story. So we'll justify the means to get to the end. And what is the end? Being right? It's horrible. It's actually how Denise and I became friends. It's that story that she's talking about, because I did what she's talking about. I was with a group of people who's very negative, very focused on being right. It just, and I've been in that group of people with balance trainers. I've been in that group of people with force free trainers. And I can just offer that as a person who's done that, I have deep regret about that, because Denise is my friend. And when she talks about this, I recall that, you know, I was part of that. And even though she's forgiven me, we've moved past it, all the things, it's still there and it still happened. And I still have to answer for that, you know, in the way that I act and behave and treat other people now. And hopefully that's what that was, is a really great learning. Well, I know it was, is a really great learning experience for me to really think about the way that I'm treating other people.
Well, and that approach, I guess you could call it, or that response, right, to that experience disregards the person entirely as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it does not, and this is my whole thing, right? I'm like, dogs are only helped through humans. We need to be paying more attention to the person, right? It disregards the context that they live within. It disregards their capacity. It disregards their needs, and just kind of highlights, you know, and from whatever direction, right? The balance trainers thinks they can fix it. The force free trainers think they can fix it. Doesn't everyone,
they caused
like,
it? Yeah.
Like everyone who hasn't met the dog knows that they could have fixed the dog. And maybe for argument's sake, right, that could be true in a completely different context, right, with a completely different person who's living a completely different life. Maybe that's true, and maybe that's not even true, actually. Maybe it isn't true for anyone. But essentially, if we're just focusing then on what we could have done for the dog or should have done for that dog, right, where's the consideration for that person's experience? Right? So that's another reason that it's stigmatized, and it's another, because we're not supposed to put ourselves even at the same level of importance of the dog, right? Because yes, we're not. That's not okay, right? And I understand the spirit of that, but I think it's taken like a turn, like it's gone sideways, right?
Can you talk a little bit about? I'm going to say what I think it is in my words, mm-hmm. and maybe you can give some clarification. And I could also be just talking about a portion of the group and not understanding that. Mm-hmm. In my experience, when stuff like that's done, when you place more importance over this than what, there's something emotional going on there, where I cannot overcome my emotions about the feeling and the way that it affects me to put in some, I'm not sure the words I'm looking for. I just can't overcome my emotions to get that, to connect with the human being, to get that other perspective. Right. I do what my sponsor always said was, I'm going to break the cussing rule, but when I would make sure that someone, well, but they have to, because it happens a lot in recovery. When you're early in recovery, well, they should, it's that evangelizing phase that Denise talks about. And she would say, you're smearing your emotions all over the wall like shit, and everyone can smell it.
Ooh.
Because it was all about me. It wasn't really about them, was it?
Mm-hmm.
It was about my comfort with them and their choices.
Mm-hmm.
Do
Right.
you
What
find that is part of what's going on, or can it be a possible answer to people that are having a hard time understanding why someone might choose behavioral euthanasia or rehoming?
So I absolutely think that could be one of probably so many reasons, right? Like, and there's probably multiple reasons for the same person having that response. It's coming from so many directions, right? But it also goes against maybe some fundamental beliefs that people aren't ready to look at for themselves, right? If I can't, if this person can't save their dog, right, how can I? Or if they can't handle it, what if I can't? It could be fear, anxiety, right? Their own fear and anxiety about failing or, not being good enough, right? There's just, it's impossible to know all of the roots, but there's thousands of them probably, right? But it definitely is our own stuff. Like, I can just say that. So if we're coming at someone and we're thinking that without being even close to the situation, right, and saying what they should, like you said, they should do this, they should do that, this would have changed it. First of all, it's helping no one, and actually is harmful, right? Because that person already who's struggling may hear that and say, wow, maybe if I had done that, maybe I didn't do enough, maybe I, and then taking that on, blaming themselves and all this. It's really, really heartbreaking when people are in the situation and it's stigmatized and they're judged for it. When really, like I said before, right, it's because we don't feel like it's okay to honor our need, our context, our capacity, just as much as we honor theirs. And I think there absolutely will be give and take, right? In any relationship, whether the relationship is with a dog, a horse, a person, a mouse, I don't know, right? But there's got to be some times where we are at least equal. Sometimes they're going to be put first. Sometimes you need to be put first, but it kind of ebbs and flows. And I think there's an all or nothing kind of mindset.
The zero sum game. Yeah.
Can I point out that it's usually women? Like, I'm not saying there are no difficult dogs.
Yeah.
But may I point out that the majority of people I'm following and such who are struggling, they took dogs, they often knew they were difficult. And all I can think about is kind of historically, women in society, right? Like, you put yourself last, you take care of the dogs, you do the children, you go to work, and you should always just dig a little deeper and pull out a little bit and give that away too. And then I don't tend to get like mansplaining. I don't spend a lot of energy on that stuff. But I have observed that in the dog world, I see kind of patterns of behavior that remind me of like the generation I grew up in. So I'm 55 or 56. And in my family, it was sort of like my mom served my dad. That was very normal. That was very culturally normal at that time. She made the dinner, she cleaned the house, she raised the kids and all that. And sometimes when I'm watching people with really challenging dogs and how they're literally erasing themselves, the extent to which their entire existence, and I think there's sort of a mix. Like, one side of it looks like it gives them purpose and meaning, like it's important to them to do that. But then the other side of it just makes me really sad, because it's like you're walking away from years of your life that are important. These are often kind of young 20s-ish people who are literally walking away from their relationships, children, because they can't, and it's heartbreaking for me. And it's also the fact that it's always women. It's just like, it's hard to miss that. And the guilt, you can't get rid of that dog, they'll kill it, nobody will. I feel like if men were caretaking for more reactive dogs, I think we would see a lot more support, a lot more, oh, aren't you, taking time for yourself. I feel like we would see a different dynamic, and we would not raise the dog up to the status of basically at the status of children or even higher than their caretakers. Because I that's what I see people say. Well, suck it up. Wait a second. Why is the dog centered equation? And why is it always on the other side of the equation.
Right. And I think that, so we tend to towards all or nothing thinking, right? Like our brains want this like very clear, you know, binary all the time. Like we just do kind of go towards that. And I feel like that comes up for everyone. That comes up here, right? So we have to center everything around this dog and their needs and all those things, which again, I do understand the spirit of that. Absolutely, right? We are guardians of them. We control their entire lives. It is our responsibility to care for them well, right? And we should absolutely do that. But I think where it goes sideways is thinking that that means disregarding you, disregarding yourself, right? I have to completely rearrange everything. I cannot leave and take breaks and take time for myself, right? When actually the opposite is true, and this is what I continuously say to folks, right, is the idea that your time to, you know, fill yourself back up is going to help you show up longer in the long term for them, to create that sustainability in your relationship with them, create that balance in your relationship with them. When there is a consistent imbalance in a relationship, what does that create? Right? It's resentment.
Resentment.
Right. Resentment is really hard to come back from, right? Once you experience that, that is going to poison that relationship at least somewhat, right? And there is so much capacity for finding joy and connection and play and fun with your dog, even if they have behavioral challenges, and actually not taking time for yourself to separate from that and come back to it when you're in a better place will make it so you miss that sometimes, right? Like even if they are struggling with behavioral stuff, you still can have a joyful relationship if there's balance. You can have a sustainable relationship if there's balance, if you have the capacity to do it. And not everyone does. And that's where we come to these conversations that people struggle with, where they're afraid to consider rehoming, they're afraid to consider BE if, you know, things are unsafe, and because that's not okay. And that circles us back to the all or nothing moment, right? I have to do it this way because that is the only way. I have to disregard myself entirely for the sake of them, when again the opposite is true. You have to show up for yourself if you're committing to the dog long term, right? Because there's no, you know, you could make multiple choices here. If today you're saying I'm committing and I'm not going down that path, then that also means that you have to commit to things that are going to create sustainability in that long-term journey with them. And if you cannot do that, most likely through no fault of your own, by the way, because, you know, the world is not supportive of really any human at this point, in the systems, the structures that we're within, you know, that is something that's a different conversation, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you guys are asking questions in here. Oh, somebody asked, Jerri, I saw a post from you once that every dog with behavior issues has an owner with unresolved trauma. Do you still believe this? Do Denise and Jess agree? I think everyone has unresolved trauma.
Yeah,
I think almost everyone does. I think so yes, I do. Now, when I said it, did I have the wherewithal to understand what I was saying when I said it? I'm not sure, because I don't know when I said it, and I don't know what it really meant to me at that time. But I can tell you now what it means to me is that we all have trauma. And so there's that. I also used to be a person of the school of thought that aggression was generally always caused by the environment or by the person that was handling the dog or that the dog lived with. But then that thing happened with Denise and Dice. And I know that Denise is not abusive to her animals. I know that her decisions are probably way more sound than mine. And so that gives me pause to say, okay, well, there's an outlier situation. So now I know that it's not always. Do I know the percentage? No. But I think when we're generally talking about aggression, most of the time, broad stroke there, it's something, there is some kind of environmental component or something with the dog parent that is way off. way, not always, because I know that's not true. So I'm curious to hear what Denise has to say. We're going to ask Michael Shikashio this question when we have him on. I'll make sure to ask about that. Somebody that deals with lots of aggressive pet dogs. But what do you think, Denise?
What did you see that I sent you a study today?
Oh yeah, about the depression and the men and the.
Yep,
It's on
but
my
there was a
list to
lot
read
more in
it.
there. So it was done in 2018. It was a survey study, and they showed a relationship between people with various mental challenges. I mean, not mental illness per se, but depression, anxiety, kind of that kind of stuff, and dogs with issues. And again, you've got it's a correlation. It's not causation, but it does bring up interesting questions. How did that happen? Was it that people who are struggling choose dogs who are also struggling, whether intentional or not, because there's something there? Or is it that it actually has a causative effect, maybe something about the way they're handling themselves? Or do people choose different breeds? But I'm going to read that very carefully a few more times because it's a lot to think about. And, the thing about causation or correlation, you can read till the cows come home. You can think till the cows come home, but you don't know the answer. All we know is that there are some correlations. And another thing that was in that study is that men are 5 times more likely to be struggling with depression who choose aversive methods.
I read this.
5 times more like that's a big difference.
Yeah.
Than women without depression. So I was like, wow, okay, that's a huge number. And so I see stuff like that, and I can't say that I have enough individual experience with different people to say, yes, there's some relationship. I just don't feel like I've seen enough. I do know a lot of dogs are intentionally adopted and people already knew there was a big issue. Because when you look at the rescue situation in this country, just the state of the rescue situation, people know taking these dogs. I think what some people don't know is that you're not just going to love it out of them. And I think we still have a very prevalent view in our society that if you just love them enough, all these problems are going to go away. Oh, he was surely abused. Frankly, he probably wasn't abused. He probably got the wrong genetic roll of the dice. I mean, that's a huge, huge thing. So anyway, I don't know. That's my kind of roundabout, I'm thinking about things kind of answer.
Gosh, that reminds me. So everything reminds me of recovery, but that really did. That I'm going to love them out of it. I'm going to, that my love's going to get them sober, and it's just such a hard lesson to learn that love and intention do not change inside of a sentient being. It can help. It's nice to have it, but there's so much action, there's so much ritual and repetition, and there's so much more than that. Somebody said something asked a question along these lines about, Amanda. She said, Jerri, I've also seen you post about people with unresolved trauma tend to, well, this is my opinion, you guys. This is always opinion. Tend to, what did you say? Tend to use rescue and difficult dogs to not deal with their trauma. I don't know if I'm going to get these two to agree with that, but I very firmly have seen people that collect dogs, or they get a dog when they're either going through some kind of breakdown or whatever. I don't want to, I'm not trying to say everybody does that, but I think it's a massive problem with rescue. I think a lot of women are choosing, wow, I'm getting really into it. And a lot of women are choosing to not have children. And this may be very old fashioned to say, but I think that love has to go somewhere. And it's easy
I love
to
this
go
comment.
Yeah,
Did you see this comment here?
What?
The amount of men I thought my love could fix.
My last partner was leading a double life.
Yeah, that got me right here. Somebody called everyone out with that one.
I was gonna love him out of that. See, I'm not saying I'm better. I'm just trying to bring this stuff up.
Isn't there like some evidence that if, like, let's say you're married to an alcoholic and you're caring for them or whatever, isn't there some statistics that when people go into recovery and recover, they often end up divorced because the person that was their relationship, that was their role. And so there's kind of like, but if I'm not saving you, then who am I and what am I doing? And I mean, talk about unresolved trauma, right? Got to fix someone.
Yeah, somebody's got to be the codependent in a dysfunctional relationship. Somebody has to be the addict and the taker, for them to fixate on, for them to get wrapped up in, for them to get. I mean, I see it all the time with people and their dogs. How they're like, okay, I'm going to say a win. I had a win today, and they have to consciously point out the positive things because they're so used to looping all the crap storm that's happening around them, and they get addicted to the disaster. Do you see that, Jess? Do you think that's a real phenomenon?
So I want to say to that, we do have a negativity bias.
Yes.
Like our brain, right? Like our human brain just do. Okay, so we're all starting out at a disadvantage in that scenario, right? So I always tell people that to normalize that a little bit, because we are going to fixate on the things that went wrong and not the 5 things that went well. We just are going to do that. We're going to ruminate on it, right? It's just your brain doing what it's supposed to do, right? It's supposed to keep you safe and alive, right? So anything that threatens that, even if it's not an actual threat that's going to harm you, your brain interprets it that way. We need to focus on that and pay attention to it and fix it and never have it happen again. So there is like a little bit of like, we all get a tiny pass for like being very, very, very fixated on the negative, right? It's just something we're wired to do. But that being said, this is what neuroplasticity is about, right? Like you can and need to mindfully and intentionally do what you just described. Like, I'm gonna point out the win. I'm gonna focus on, and like sometimes you're holding really tightly to that one win, right? Because it's not automatic yet for that to be your focus. It's maybe never automatic for that to be your focus, especially then if you're someone who is also navigating mental health challenges, right? You're already struggling to do that in all the areas of your life, so needing to purposely and like really, really intentionally find the wins and celebrate them and highlight them is something we all need to do more of, simply because we're not wired to do it naturally. And then, like you said, when you're in a cycle, you're in a pattern, you're so used to this particular manifestation of your relationship with your dog, where it's like everything is a disaster, everything is bad, it's always this way, he always does that, she never does this, like it will never, like all of the all or nothing thinking again comes up, right? When you are so used to that, it is really hard to shift out of that. And we have, the other challenge with this is that we have evidence to say that our dogs are challenging, right? Like, we're not just making it up. They are blowing up on the sidewalk. They are, dragging us down the street. Like, they have done these things that were unexpected, scary, that we didn't know how to handle and deal with. So we have some evidence to say, oh, your fear and your anxiety and the negative bias is valid because shit has happened, right? And that's really, so it's really hard to purposely kind of balance that. So I always try to talk to people about, like, can we give it equal airtime, right? Can we give the good or even just neutral experiences with them equal airtime to the bad? We don't want to invalidate it. We don't want to say, like, it's okay, get over it, move on. None of those things. It was valid. It was challenging. You were overwhelmed by it. You were stressed by it. You were harmed by it, whatever it is, right? The rough moments. But can you give equal space to, like, right now, Dio is laying down next to me. I could just completely disregard the fact that he's just chilling out here right now because of the fact that he had a reaction on a walk yesterday, right? But I have to purposely be like, oh, here I am chatting on this live. My kids are like running around screaming somewhere, and the dog is just, hanging out here in this moment. But my brain is not going to clock that unless I point it out to myself, unless I consciously make an effort to be like, oh, this moment is nice, actually. Oh, maybe it's not always bad, right? Maybe it's not constant challenge, because right now we're okay.
See, we need to be more like our dogs, because your dog isn't thinking about it. Your dog is having a nap.
We need to be more like our dogs in many ways, and that is a really good one, for sure. They have moved on. They are not in that moment, right? that's like the blessing and the curse of having the human brain, right? It's like we get to like have this metacognition where we're like think back to like all
the
moments, and right.
Well, I know. I mean, for our ability to say 35 years ago, I had a dog, and then we whip up some, you know what I mean? It's like, wow, that's impressive. Like, that's longer than most dogs, well, all dogs live, really. And we're still fixating on the could have happened, almost happened, it was terrible, but it didn't. You're okay. So I'll move on, you know? And something I just want to mention, since we're talking about reactive dogs, you actually don't have to fix them. And I think we need to tell people that. You actually can opt out. You can say, I'm going to live with this dog in my house. I'm going to exercise it such and such a way. I am not actually going to go out into the real world with food and toys or whatever you do. I'm not going to do that. And that's actually a valid option. Or you can say, I'm taking a week off. I need a week off. I think we often get into it, well, this is what I do. This is how we do it. The dog won't be happy. You know what? Sometimes I think people would be surprised at how I had a dog. This is not a reactive dog. I had a dog who didn't particularly love training, but I'm a dog trainer, so I trained her, right, for years. She knew lots of stuff, but I just couldn't get her competition ready. Years I did this. And I found myself less and less enthusiastic about training. And I remember one day thinking, I'm not going to train today, which was a big deal. Next day, not going to train. I never trained her again. And you know what? We were both way happier for it because it was it wasn't important to her. So she just did dog pet things. And she was a great pet dog. She didn't miss it. And it took so much stress off my life. And that allowed our relationship to actually become pretty good because she was a good pet dog. And it's like, wow, look at that. It's like, you know, sometimes with certain reactive behaviors, you can opt out. You do not have to teach your dog to accept people in your house. If it's rare, put the dog in a crate. Oh, problem solved. Like, so it's just like, you can allow things to slide. And some folks, I think, would be a lot happier and safer.
My number one thing I want people to stop feeling like they need to do with any dog, let alone a reactive dog. The gold standard somewhere along the way in the industry, I don't know if it's social media or whatever, has set this weird, like arbitrary gold standard at dogs that don't know each other passing like this on a sidewalk. And that's the sign that your dog is ultimately trained and ultimately fine. I've never had a reactive dog in my life. And I don't really make a habit of passing like this. Like and everybody wants to say, well, what are the words? Well, I have to. Well, I have to. And I'm like, I don't think you do. I think you want to because it's easier than stepping off the street or going around. And I get some people live in really, urban, busy areas, but that's a thing I'd just like most people to just opt out of. Like, our dogs don't need to, like, do each other. They don't know each other. They're not, a lot of us have really powerful breeds that have a tendency to be slightly aggressive to other dogs, bully people. I know that you're not supposed to say that because it's up each other. It's all, but they are. They have, even in their play style, so even if it was a nice congenial meeting, it can still go south in 10 seconds, so that's something that I'd like to, you don't have to do that.
Right. Well,
you could just,
we all get stuck on like, I'm supposed to, he's supposed to, he should, right? And if you never, look at that more closely, if you never question that, to say, oh wait, but who said they're supposed to do I actually need that? Do I actually need them to do that? Right? Or whatever it is too, like that's an example, passing, a dog on the street, accepting people in the home, like you have to look at your particular context and see what actually you need your dog to do and what actually is fine for them to not do. And I feel like in conversations and one-on-ones and things that I've done, like that's a lot of the work that we'll do, right? Is unpacking the should and the supposed to, right? I say to everyone, literally everyone, should is a red flag word. If that pops into your mind about literally anything, dogs or not, by the way, like this is all applicable to all things. If should pops in, pause, time out, throw the flag, like we need to reevaluate that. Says who? Is that actually important to you? Is that actually necessary for you? Maybe the answer is yes, and that's fine. Okay, so then let's focus on that, right? It could be the case, but a lot of the time it isn't. and we're getting really, really stuck on the should and the supposed to, and what it turns into is self-judgment, actually, right? So you have the layer of, I already feel bad that my dog can't do this thing, right? And then you feel bad about yourself because your dog isn't doing that thing. And like, that's where the human emotion element gets amplified, right? Because not only are you struggling with the emotion that comes from the should and the supposed to, but then you're also struggling with the emotion about what that means about you, right? And why you're failing and other people are able to do it, or all of those things, right? So we always have our layer of challenging emotion, and then we always love to add judgment of ourselves for having the challenging feeling, and that's super fun. So we're really good at amplifying our own emotional challenges. I feel like it's like this is an automatic thing. So you need to like get under those layers and question those things a little bit more.
Yeah, actually, I was thinking about your should. I often think about, like, it is rarely appropriate to tell someone else what they should do. It's just, like, if we could just eliminate that word from every interaction in real life, because you don't actually know what I should do. And even if you do think you know, did I ask you for your opinion? I mean, if I asked you, then of course, run with it, but I don't think there should be a lot of should in conversation. Because it implies that, one, I know you better than you know you.
Yeah.
And two, that you should actually respect a random stranger on the internet. Like, the number of people are like, well, I mean, I don't know. Especially like in a world, like I don't know how to cook, right? So if I was in a cooking sphere, I would take in everybody's information because I don't know anything, right? So if you said substitute salt for sugar, I'd be like, oh, okay. And I'd be out there doing it, right? But just in a sphere where I know stuff, it always amazes me how people like, well, here's what you should do. And I'm just kind of thinking, do I know you? I mean, I'm like, what, do we have a relationship? But I'd love to, if maybe I should do that with one of my posts where I don't let people respond except for Jerry. I should do like a thing where I post and I say, you cannot say should. You can only ask questions.
Yeah,
explore.
Coco used to do that to me with why. She would say, stop asking people that. Why are you asking them that? They have their own reason of why they're doing something. Just ask them to explain a little bit more. But why is really triggering, should is really triggering. It's strictly outlawed in AA. You can't say should. You can make suggestions, and then you can take the suggestions if you'd like. And if you don't, you can go and do more experimenting outside of there if you'd like. And the reason that it's like that is to keep the group together. It keeps the group together, and it allows for nuance within everyone's recovery because people are so different. I had to go to like 3 meetings every single day for 3 a day for weeks because I was like, well, a dumpster fire, and then it was different for somebody else that came in the same time as me, and nobody was ever like, well, you know what you should do. They just didn't say that because the quickest way to get someone turned off or a defensive wall put up is to tell them what they should do. Especially like you said, if they're not asking. I ask Denise this stuff a lot. Like, how do I talk to this person about this? How do I bring this up? Because I know what I can't do. I know what's not helpful, but I'm still in the process of learning, how to talk to people about things that when they are my friend, when they are
but that's it, Jerry. You are a rock star at conversation and keeping conversations on task in an environment like this. Like, your ability not to get sucked into the weeds is sort of legendary. But the difference is when you're close to something. So it's like, things can be very obvious when you're not in them because you're looking from the outside in, and it can be really obvious. But when you're inside, everything feels different and big and hard. And, I do wonder, like, some people with some dogs, if somebody else had that dog, it'd be so interesting to ask them, well, what would you be saying about them or to them? And I think a lot of them would be like, wow, that person deserves a halo. Look at that. That dog only had one reaction the whole time it was out, right? Like, it's like, we can have perspective for other people, and we can have perspective when we're not close, but everything changes. Like, sometimes I'll run into a work issue, and I'll actually have my husband look at it, because I'm like, I'm upset. I'm feeling upset. I know that if I respond now, it's not going to be a good response. And so he'll sit down, he'll be like, all right, and he'll write it for me. And I'll be like, wow, okay. And I'll just clean it up a little. And he'll do the same thing with me. If he's upset about something, he's like, I need you to write this one because I can't. And I go through it, slash it up, and then he fixes what he likes. And it's just, there's just something about having distance that gives perspective. And we don't give it to ourselves. We have a hard time with that.
Yeah. That's called cognitive diffusion. So
Yeah.
you
were talking
right?
about it in the beginning.
Yeah, like you're right. If you're really, really fused to your thoughts, your beliefs in that moment, you need to be able to pull them apart. You need to be able to distance yourself from them, and that gives you an entirely different relationship with that situation. But if you are in a space where you're feeling too emotional, it's really, really hard to do that. And that's fair, right? Because the more emotional we are, the less logical we can be. They're like inverse, right? So we need to wait either until we can kind of come down, we can validate our feelings, we can help ourselves through those moments, and then respond or have someone else help us, right? So your husband can do that because he's not fused. In that moment, you are, right? So yeah, that is kind of going back to what we were talking about before too, is the idea that we do not know the context in which that person lives, or their particular needs, their particular trauma, their capacities, right? And we make all these assumptions like we do, or we tend to kind of just assume that everyone else is like us, right? Which is for sure not the case, but that is just what our brains automatically do. Well, if I could do it this way, you should be able to. Here's what I did, right? So that's where, like, actually we get trained in therapy school to not constantly use our experience to help people figure out theirs, right? It's appropriate sometimes, and it's absolutely powerful and helpful in many cases. But we also have to be really careful about it, because I'm not in your particular context, right? And I feel like that's something trainers don't pause and pay attention to, is to, here's the protocol for training this issue. This is what you do. Oh, your dog does that? Do this. Right?
Jerri and I talk about this a lot, because
a lot.
we're in a country with millions and millions, millions of people, and we are not a homogenous country. We come with so many different thoughts about dogs. Like, some people, a dog is pretty close to livestock, and for other people, a dog is more important than a child. I mean, these are like vast swaths of people who have really different ideas, and then we come in and tell them what they're supposed to do, and we're literally, we're speaking past each other, or saying to somebody, the solution to your fence fighting is that you need to put up a solid fence. When you say that, you need to understand the cost of a solid fence, right? Like, you just told somebody to put up how many thousands of dollars with fencing, and you weren't even embarrassed about it. Like, you didn't even hear what you just said. There's a lot of that in the dog world. Just hire a pet sitter to come in and take your dog for a walk in the middle of the day so you can get a break. Well, a pet sitter charges $40 to come to the door and take the dog around the block a few times. That's just not going to work. And there's so many people who are just really kind of holding on. So either their time or their money, or even just the way they think about dogs in society is it's so unkind when you put yourself in their shoes without even trying to find out. Because, and I'm learning a lot about this, right? As time goes by, as I'm friends with people like Jerri, that you rarely does your experience go beyond a teeny tiny circle, because no one of us knows more than 500 people or whatever we know. That's such a drop in the bucket. And you talk to somebody who lives 100 miles away, and you realize, well, that's a completely different perspective, and we're not listening. The one I personally have a hard time with is, I'm a super logical person, and I struggle with emotional people, because I don't, it's not that I'm not emotional, it's just that I'm just sure if I explain myself a little bit more logically, then you're going to understand. Like, I'm just so sure that the problem here is that I haven't been clear enough. I'm getting better. I'm learning to walk away. I'm learning that some people, it's not about logic, it's about how they're feeling. And if I can't meet them on that level, because we're so far apart, then I'm not going to. But God, has it taken me a lot? I would say it was in my 50s before I finally really understood that being more logical and pounding on it one more time from a different angle is not going to work. Sometimes you just have to walk away. You just have to stop.
I am more emotional than logical. So I'm like, more passion, more footwork, more energy, yell it louder, you know? And I have to
we need one of each of you, like on on people's shoulders, right? So because we need the balance. The balance is important. When you bring the balance together, that's actually what we want.
Yeah.
Right? We want to acknowledge both sides of things. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the beauty of having friends and mentors in the industry, is that, you know, we're all literally talking about dogs all day long. We're kind of, you know, and for doggies, and it's cool because my friends don't care that I have all these questions. Denise doesn't care that I have these questions, and you know, Madison doesn't care that I want to talk about, and it just helps so much because I can see how much I've grown by just saying the quiet part out loud, and then somebody else going, well, that's actually not my experience. Denise one time said something to me that like really just sealed the deal for me when she was like, you do realize, Jerri, that not everyone has as much energy as you. And I was like I hadn't even considered that people
I think
aren't jumping out of bed
about,
like I am.
Yeah, we were talking about like get up and walk your dog, because you were on this thing about you got to get your dog out there. You got to, and I'm like, no, Jerri, no, they don't actually.
Yeah,
and my dog doesn't want that either. Actually, he's in bed longer than I am. Like I'm up and I'm like, I have to be like, hey, can you? It's time to go outside. Get down here.
It was a simple little phrase, and it worked really well because I had not thought about that everybody doesn't have boundless, endless amounts of energy like I do. So,
and you know, also those conversations take place privately, not publicly.
Correct.
Like, because we have a close relationship, we can tease. Like, I can send her a note and say, you did not say that. Did you say that? Did you say that? We'll talk about that. Like, because we're good friends, right? So it's not a problem. But and now I could say it publicly, like the beginning of this, because we have a relationship and all. But when you're walking in on somebody else's life, somebody else's thread, you really kind of have to think about how they're going to take that, because you could easily take it in a very defensive, angry way, because there's time and place, right? There's certain things you can say in certain times in certain places, and closed groups are not the same as open spaces.
Right. There's safety, right? So like you have safety with that person or in that relationship or in that group. So there's that comfort in being able to, you know, express those things, tease, whatever it is, to challenge those things. It's important, but there's not that sense of safety publicly, understandably.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, that's also a huge challenge.
Yeah, we're definitely all, I feel like we're starting to come to this kind of realization within a lot of the members of this community that the way we're communicating with each other, with the public, that it's not just someone else's fault. That it's like all of us, and we all are responsible for acknowledging these things and talking about them out loud and saying when we made a mistake and then what happened and how it's like now, you know, because that's how people learn about that stuff. I never had anybody set me down until I went into recovery, and was like, this is how you make a proper amends to someone when you have done a dumb. You know, I didn't know. I was like, let's just go and tell them sorry. And they're like, that's step 9 for a reason. Please stop talking. You know, like, you learn, like, don't say anything for 30 days because you're not ready. Okay, now this. And I can see how if we just apply some of the basic things that we know from other areas of our life that make sense to us, that help us navigate relationships and life, that we would do much, much better in this community.
That silence thing, that 30 days, totally resonates with me. Because, you know, these threads I've been doing where people can say what they want, but nobody can respond. I find myself interacting with those threads in a different way, because I'm not going to respond. So I'm not reading to respond. I'm truly just reading. And I have a policy. I like everything. It doesn't matter if I like what you said or not. And I tell people it's actually to help me keep track of what I've read, right? And it's interesting for me to read because I find myself reading like it's a book. You know what I mean? It's a different type of an interaction, and it's much more even. And I think I hear a lot better. I think even the stuff I don't like, I'm reading because I've seen some stuff that makes me uncomfortable. I just don't agree, you know. But like the comment anyway, and just sit with that. And it's interesting to see how I get more comfortable with it. And if I did want to respond, my response would be better. So let's say the rules changed, and then tomorrow, because by tomorrow I've been sitting with it for a day, and I wasn't in there to respond, I would make a better choice, which is just it's just interesting to think about how would I apply that way of thinking when I don't have such rules in place, where I'm just doing normal kind of social interaction when I encounter something I don't love. But it was just, I don't know, it's interesting to observe one's own behavior when you change rules. Just how do you respond to those changes?
Right. We have distance from it then, right? Like if you did respond the next day, it would be an absolutely different response than had you done it, because there's distance. And if we could do that honestly more with our own thoughts too, right? We would have absolutely different responses, emotional responses to our own thoughts and experiences about our
How do you do that? How do you do that?
To physically tell myself, let it breathe. Let it breathe. Because I will, you know how I am. I want to just ice pick, you know, and I have to, it took me years, really until now, until this last year. I legitimately did not understand how powerful my emotions are, and that my logic is just as powerful, but it comes in later. And if I don't let it breathe, then it does not come in. And then I make this huge foul up. The logic comes in, and then I have to crawl back and say that I'm sorry, which I'm fine doing. But what I've noticed about that is that way there's people that get hurt. People get hurt. So now I just say, let it breathe. What you're thinking is a thought. It's just your brain perceiving a thought. You are not your thoughts. You know, your reality is your thoughts. And if you keep saying this, and if you keep driving this nail in, you're going to make exactly what you think is going to happen. And if I just step back and let it breathe, every single time, it naturally just bubbles up the way it was supposed to. 50% of the time, what I think happened isn't even what's going to happen. It's my brain picking up on some kind of pattern, and I perceive that what's happening is it's self-preservation. To me, I'm like, oh, I got to keep myself safe, so I need to say this thing because defense wall, you know, and really that's just my perception of what's happening. The person has just said words, and then I am just existing. And now I've made it into this huge world, so I tell myself, stop, just breathe, give it some space, and then I just try to redirect myself to something else, because inevitably, even that one small redirection, even if it's just for 5 minutes, when I come back to the issue, it's now lessened. And and I can see like, oh, there's a little tinge of clarity there. It's been really working for me. I know that probably sounded a little complicated, but it's just breathe, give it
it's
space.
Helpful. I find it helpful to hear more strategies, because I know that time is a strategy that works for me. So especially in an online interaction, like sometimes somebody will respond to you and I just don't know about it because I didn't see it or whatever. And a day will go by and I'll find out they responded, and I can tell how different I am, how I'm seeing it differently. Are there other strategies? Can you throw something out for us? Like, so time is one. What is there something else we can do to help us not respond so intensely, maybe even to our own feelings or distress? To how can we help ourselves breathe? What is it? What can we do?
So first of all, we need to acknowledge the feeling that we're having, right? You are not going to skip over it and get sorry.
Well, that's what we're trying to do.
Of course.
We're trying to spin so that we don't have to feel.
Right.
Yeah.
So first strategy is to name it, right? This is a strategy. Name it to tame it is the phrase. I didn't make it up. It's a thing. Dan Siegel, you can Google it. I can post about it.
I love that.
But essentially, it is legitimately as simple as naming the emotion that you are experiencing in this particular moment, right? So I'm anxious. I'm feeling angry right now. Whatever it is, just name it. What that does is automatically brings a little bit of logic back online, right? Because you had to think about what it is that you're feeling, right? So it automatically switches you a little closer to that logical space. It naturally brings down the emotional intensity a little bit, starts to bring it down because you've just validated yourself, right? You've just acknowledged how you're feeling. So that's important and powerful and creates safety. So the first thing you have to do is actually turn into the feeling, right? And not away from it.
I always
right. So I get
ride the dragon.
Yes, you commented on my reel about that. I loved it. Yeah, well, that's the reel I made was like, everyone asked me, how do I stop feeling ... with my dog, right? And my answer is, you don't. Like, you don't stop feeling that thing. You actually turn towards it. Then, when it has kind of come down, which it will start to do naturally if you give it space and you allow it to be there, that's when you can start to look at the thought that's underlying, right? What's actually coming up. And that's where you want to ask yourself 2 questions about the thought that you're having. Is this accurate? And is this helpful? Right? Because sometimes things are accurate, but they're not necessarily helpful for us to like dwell on, right? But most of the time, the way that the story we're telling ourselves about something, right, is not accurate. It may have some pieces of truth to it. It may have different things that contribute to it, right? So some of it might be true, but the way we're phrasing it probably isn't 100% accurate. So once you have named it, once you've named your feeling, you've turned towards it, you've allowed space for it, when it has kind of not fully subsided, of course, because it still may be there. But then if you can notice, what are you telling yourself about this? What am I saying about this comment I got on my reel that made me feel like all, bothered or whatever, right? Okay, what am I saying to myself about that? What meaning has that taken in my mind? What perspective have I projected onto that? Is that accurate? Is that helpful? So that's what I would, that's what I recommend to everyone to kind of go through. And I didn't make any of that up. That's therapy, everyone.
I'm putting together something right now that's taking me way longer than it should, Jess. I'm so sorry. I'm actually going to put together a free webinar event where Jess is going to host this and help me. And we're going to dive into some of this stuff that we're talking about right now. We're not going to really talk about dogs. Yes, we're talking about dogs. That's the subject matter. That's the commonality. But it's really about these exact things. How do we change our thoughts? I'm a huge fan, while we're on this topic, of Byron Katie. If anybody has ever heard of her, she has something called The Work, and you can go and get it on her website. It's just a worksheet, but this is what she does. She helps people change their thoughts and get out of thought loops, and it's basic, simple things, very similar to what Jess was just saying. But if you're interested in that topic, you can check her out. I cannot tell you how much that's helped me. And the thing that helps me the most is when I watch her work with people, because you can see individual human beings and you can see almost even the moment that their brain gets the hilarious nature of what we do with ourselves and how we create these worlds that don't even exist, and we live in them and and spin around and decorate it, and you get it, it helps you step outside of that world and put other thoughts to these corresponding things. And it really helped me. It really, really helped me a lot. So you can check that out. You can check out when it happens. It's just going to be a relationship webinar where we're going to talk about trauma. We're going to talk about connection. We're going to talk about some of these strategies to help people with, likely fragmentation, self-actualization, blah, blah, blah.
All the things.
We're going to get into it.
We're going to cover it all.
In 1 hour.
Yeah, totally. We can do that.
Yeah.
I believe in us.
But you know what? Even just 1 or 2 strategies. Like, I've got some strategies now. I'm going to walk away from this going, next time I'm feeling upset, take a moment to name that, figure it out, step back, and see what happens if I just acknowledge it. It's easy to do with the happy emotions. A little tricky with the ones I'm not thrilled about. I don't want to own my anger. I don't want to own my jealousy. I don't want to own all those sad, miserable things. I want to own my other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I can see how naming it, because I'm a verbal person, so naming it and watching it would help take some of that edge off. So that's super cool.
And too, Denise, like another thing that I do is when I'm out, because you're out with Zen a lot, the way that I'm out with Enzo, is if I'm feeling something, then I will physically out loud talk myself through the entire process that Jess just said, because I'm very verbal as well. And I will say, okay, this is not rational. Like, you just spoke to this person 2 hours ago, and all of a sudden now they're not your friend anymore. This is something in your brain. They just sent you an emoji a couple of hours ago. They're fine. Yeah. You know, and I'll have to do that because in my head, it doesn't sound that way. Yeah. In my head, it's the goblin. Oh. Yeah. That negative bias goblin that we all have.
When I work with,
I have a friend who I love dearly, and she's utterly brilliant, really. And she'll say things like something will happen. She'll say something, and I'm just like, how did you get from there to there? Like, her capacity to leap from something unbelievably minor to putting her head in a bucket is legendary, you know? And I'll just say to her, and I just kind of say, I just don't understand what steps took place in your brain between this very minor event and where you got over here. And she's like, I know, I'm working on it. But it's interesting to watch how different people,
the worst case
people,
scenario people.
Yes, they go places, and you're just like, I can't. Do we have to sit down and go through this all over again? Like, you know, because, you know, she's worried about money. So it's like, we sat down, we did the budget, we do not have a problem. But we have to go over it again. And now it's just a joke. I'm just like, do we have to sit down and do the budget again? And she's like, okay, no.
It's almost like it's a way for people like that to cope with their anxiety about what could be. If they just doomsday it out enough, then I'll be prepared if the doomsday in fact happens. Right. And then I won't be as surprised. No.
And then you can say, I told you so. I told you so. Right. It was terrible. It was just as bad as I said it was going to be.
And that's why we have a negative bias, and that's your brain trying to keep you safe, right? So your brain is just being a brain. Just being a brain. It's doing brain things, right?
Thank you, brain.
Yes, okay, like I get it. But also, you're not correct all the time, right? The phrase is like, you know, don't believe everything you think, essentially.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Don't believe everything you think, and our minds are dangerous neighborhoods, and we should not go into them alone. Right. Always take a buddy if you have
to. That's why you have a therapist to kind of talk you off the ledge and get you into a better place.
Listen, I also have a therapist. Like, let me just be clear, right? Like, we just go up like till someone reaches the boss therapist at some point. We all just have.
The final boss is Bowser.
Well, they say it's lonely at the top. They're probably talking about therapists. Because you got that therapist, that top therapist, chief therapist, got nowhere to go.
No, the chief therapist goes to their hairstylist.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she's like, one of my best friends is a hairstylist, and she does this thing where she goes into the bathroom and she puts the camera down, and we do like this TV show where she tells me all of the crazy stuff because she can't tell anyone because there's hairstylist, you know, client privilege. But she tells me, and I'm telling you, that's where the final boss therapist goes. They tell their
that makes a lot of sense. My friend just said the head therapist is Dio, which is my dog, so I think that is actually accurate.
That's a good choice.
Just to like circle it back, is, you know, he's sleeping on the job at the moment, but he is in every session that I have. So he's always here.
Love that.
I know. Well, speaking of not going into it alone, I have my group program that I'm gonna go do right now.
It's perfect timing.
Waiting for them.
This was so fun.
This was great. Thank you so.
It was
I did
fun.
it. There we go.
How'd you do it? Whoa.
I'm gonna make a heart hand.
Do you have an iPhone? You don't
have like this one.
Video reactions on. Denise is so upset.
I like that because I feel like it's coming from my soul. Like I'm actually.
She doesn't have. I don't. Do you have an iPhone, Denise?
I have an iPhone.
Oh.
Here we go. I'm just gonna tap it until it makes it go. Oh wait, okay. Wait, I'm just gonna pick emojis.
There you go.
Oh, that's not even working. Oh,
Thank
what
you
am I
so
doing?
much, all the people that were here
Yes,
and that
thank you
commented.
all.
You guys are the best participants. Like every time we do anything in this community, the comments are always great. People are always supportive. You ask great questions. I just love it so much. And thank you, Jess, for coming to our crazy little talk show.
Listen,
Thank you
anytime.
so much.
I could talk
So
about this
fun.
stuff all day.
We are batting 1,000 when it comes to awesome guests. So appreciate you
We
being
really
here.
are.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we'll do it
Thanks
again
for
next
inviting me.
week.
Yeah.
We'll do it again. Okay,
All right,
everybody,
have a good time
have
tonight.
fun the rest of the
Bye,
night.
guys.
Thank you so much for being
Thank
here. Bye.
you. Bye.